What's up, deal hunters? In this episode, we're going to discuss what happens if your flip turns into a flop and just won't sell. Stay tuned. Hello, and welcome back to the Foreclosure Deals Coach podcast. I am your host and Foreclosure Deals Coach, Donny. And in this episode, we're going to go into detail about 3 steps you can take if your flip turns into a flop and refuses to sell. Now, listen, a lot of people are afraid when they're doing their first deal. What happens if they buy the house, spend all this money on the remodel, and then can't find a way to get this darn thing sold on the open market? With all the changes in the market recently, this is a valid concern to a point. But guys, we're going to start with our mindset piece as we do each and every single week. This quote really struck me. Don't let your fear of what could happen make nothing happen. So many people want to get into real estate investing. I know a lot of you watch the show. You're clearly thinking about taking the first step and getting your first deal done, but you're afraid of these things that might happen during the process, and it's preventing you from taking that first initial step. Am I right? Listen, don't be afraid. If you sit here and be fearful of something that's unlikely to happen, I've done over 300 flips in my career, and I can tell you one common theme: every last one of those properties ultimately sold. Okay. Now, some sold for much less than I wanted to sell them for. Others took much longer than I wanted to sell, that I wanted to take to sell. Because let's face it, we all want these houses to sell tomorrow afternoon, the day after you listed. And when we were doing super well in the 2020 and 2021 markets, we were measuring our time on market in hours. All we had to do was take some pretty pictures and put the home on the market, and then suddenly you'd have multiple showings, multiple offers, bidding wars, and etc. Well, as the market has cooled off, we definitely have to handle the emotional part of a house taking longer to sell. And it really is just about the emotion, okay? The reality is anything that's priced well is ultimately going to sell. And in the housing world, we will always have a demand for housing. There's no future in the foreseeable future anyway, where human beings are not going to want a home to live in. Now, the type of home is going to vary: apartments, condos, single family homes, mansions, small homes, tiny homes, big homes. I could go on forever. But the bottom line is every house is going to sell at some point. You just have to not be concerned about it and be able to work through it. Now, in the event you can't get your property sold, there are some action items, deal hunters, that you can take to get that property sold. But you have to be realistic, okay? Not every deal is going to be a deal. I've done over 300 flips in my career, and we make our money when we buy, as we talk about all the time. If you've done proper deal analysis, you should be able to predict within a couple percentage points on what that property is going to sell for. Nobody's perfect. It is some degree of speculation because we're going off of what's happening in the future, but it's really hitting home right now. I want to bring up this article in the Gazette, which is our local newspaper here in the Colorado Springs market where I do most of my business, and it talks about how currently we are in a bit of a market slowdown. Why? Well, it seems kind of obvious. In 2020 and 2021, interest rates were wandering around 2 to 3%. So the buying power of the typical consumer was extremely high. They could buy a lot more house for the money. Their payments were lower. People, smart people, jumped in and they bought a house. Well, quite logical, when everybody's trying to buy, the supply of properties is down because less people were selling because it was very difficult to find a property to replace the existing property. Well, now let's fast forward, okay? Rates are now wandering in the mid to late 6% range. 6.5 is the prevailing rate at the time of this recording. This means buying power has gone down. Furthermore, sellers who might have sold their home and upgraded to a different home are now concerned that property values are at all-time highs on average, okay? The median price of a home has definitely come down a little bit in the past 6 to 9 months, but the harsh reality is homes are more expensive now than they've been in a long time. So your typical seller is now facing two problems. One, a higher interest rate on the home they're going to buy, and two, inventory is still kind of low because a lot of sellers are opting to stay in their existing homes and existing low interest rate mortgages as opposed to going out there and toughing it out and buying a new property. As a result, we have supply is relatively stable and demand has decreased a little bit, but it has not been enough to see a significant decrease in the overall pricing of houses. So you join the coaching program. Let's paint a scenario here, okay? You join the coaching program, and as the promise, I help you to find a deal that's going to make you a minimum profit of $25,000 or more. Okay, we fix up the property to spec, we fix it to market. We don't over improve the property, we don't under improve the property, and we look at actual data to determine where the line is to make sure we're improving it to market. So you bought the property right, because that's the idea. You fix it to market, and now you're selling it based on the analysis you did on that property back when you bought it. We make our money when we buy, we realize that gain when we sell the property. Okay, it goes on the market, and for whatever market condition, whatever reason at that moment, it doesn't really matter what it is, but the house doesn't sell right away. What do we do then? Well, there are three things you can do to help get your property that won't sell to sellable condition. We're going to hop in right now and determine those three things together. The key here is not to be afraid, though. You have to know there's an exit strategy, there's always an out, and the real fear is that you never take the first step of doing a fix and flip deal because you're afraid of what might happen, right? That mindset is what you're looking to shift. Let's hop in. Number one, and the most obvious thing you can do if your property is not selling is reduce the price. Here's the thing, deal hunters. Every house is going to sell at the right price at some point, no doubt about it. Now, in some cases, if you're willing to wait long enough, you can sell it for that higher price, maybe even above your price. The nature of real estate is that it increases in value over time, but you don't want to be on the market for 6 months to a year or even more as the market catches up. And as that article mentions in the Gazette, we're a little slower right now. So you want to price the property with the fact that we're slower. The good news is we've had 90 to 180 days of this current interest rate. So we're not adapting to what we believe the market's going to become, but rather by looking at solid comparable sales, we can predict what the house is going to sell for in today's market based on today's interest rates. Because although they've come up, they came up about 6 to 9 months ago. So now these new interest rates are kind of the norm. My price drop schedule is generally done. I do a first price drop after about 2 weeks if the property hasn't sold, and I like to go in nice round numbers. My number is $5,000. That's how people generally search for homes in my market. In more expensive markets, they may search in the 10,000 bracket. But once you know what increments people are searching in, you want to discount to a slightly lower increment than the prior one and drop your price. First drop is about 2 weeks in, second drop usually 3 to 4 weeks after that, and then it's kind of based on showing traffic from there. Don't hesitate to drop your price. It's better to make a little less on the deal you're working on now and be able to move on to the next deal than it is to stay in a deal for 3 to 6 months on the market, waiting for the market to catch up with your desired asking price. Drop your price consistently and often, and do enough of a price drop that it makes sense to the market and they will see it when you drop the price and perhaps bring new buyers into the market at that point. So the first thing we can do is drop our price. The second thing we can do is look at what's selling and change the condition accordingly. Maybe there were things you did on the original remodel scope of work that now need to be done to make your property competitive. The key to getting this data is to be objective based on what's under contract or pending sale in your local market. So hop into the MLS or ask your agent to do so and look at every home in the neighborhood that is currently under contract to sell. And then if you can arrange for a showing, a lot of times you can ask the agent listing it, if say you wanted to offer a backup offer on it or something like that. Most of the time, if you just ask to see it, most people will be cool with it if the house is vacant, right? But you go through the property, take a look at it objectively or just use the pictures and make a determination if there are condition items that you can change. You'd be surprised at what a really good landscaping job can do for the overall presentation on a property. Or maybe it's a little more major. Maybe those countertops were dated. You knew they were dated when you did the remodel, but you thought they were salvageable. Now you're seeing that all the comps in the area that are under contract or pending have nice new granite countertops. So you got to be honest with yourself. Spend another $1,000, $1,500, take the property off the market for a week or two, and get that item done. So when it comes back on the market, it has that setting, whatever it happens to be, that really seems like is causing the property not to sell. Guys, in my experience, in most cases, condition is not the reason a property is not selling. Okay, it can happen if you missed or you shortcutted some things you know you needed to take care of. That can be the case, but I can tell you in most cases it's price. Your second step though is really evaluate the condition, the features, the amenities. Compare that to what is selling, not even what's sold, and especially not what's active in the market right now, but what is currently under contract or pending sale, and you will get a real feel for what the consumer wants right now. That could be a big difference in why your property is not selling and the other ones are. Okay. Lastly, the last thing you can do is not sell the property. Now, I know that goes against a fix and flip, right? After all, you bought the property to make that minimum profit of $25,000. But, guys, the thing about flipping homes is it's an excellent way to generate an income and a large income at that. My objective for my clients is to do 3 to 4 flips per year where they make a minimum profit of $25,000. That's $100K in income and a great living for most people, in addition to the day job you can maintain while doing that. However, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing if you end up with a cash flowing rental. You see, your long term objective is to do enough rentals or buy and hold properties that you're building income from rental income, which you can eventually live on. It takes time, but you can eventually live on it. And you're building wealth through the appreciation of that asset. Although we buy the property to flip them, you have to accept that if the property doesn't sell, you may end up turning it into a cash flowing rental that's going to make you more money over the long term. This is not at all a bad thing. Okay. While it wasn't your initial objective to turn the property into a rental, if you bought the property right, you should be able to rent the property out for at least a break even on a payment after a refinance. Understand that when you buy the property, you're generally using hard or private money, and your interest rate's about 10 to 12%, which is generally too high to cash flow it as a rental unless you bought it really, really well. Okay, so you're looking to refinance the property down to a 6 to 7% rate and keep the property for the long haul. But if you do that refinance, you should have no trouble, especially now that rentals are way up, because a lot of people are not buying with this higher interest rate. Okay, we are seeing an increase in rental prices like we've never seen before. Because if you're somebody looking to buy a property and you get hit with that big interest rate, you're going to switch to rental because you got to have a place to live. Right? So turning it into a rental may not be the worst option for you if we just can't get it sold. The takeaway from this show, guys, is don't be afraid of something that hasn't happened yet. In my long-term experience in doing this, all the properties I wanted to sell ultimately sold. Some took longer, some sold for less, etc. This is not an exact science, but the common theme is if you bought it right, and you did the right work to it, there's no valid reason why a property won't sell. And if you're freaking out about it, that's because you're getting emotionally involved in the deal. Okay. And you can't do that. Look at your days on market and understand that in the current market cycle that we're in right now, as people are adjusting to the interest rate increase over time, you're going to have lesser inventory, which is going to drive buyers out of the market because they don't have much to pick from. Okay. But if somebody has to buy a house or even really wants to buy a house, and everybody needs a place to live, right? So most people come to town and they have to buy a home. If your home, your house is priced correctly to become that person's home, they will buy your home. I promise that. Okay, but you have to treat this like an investment. And by taking the emotion out of it, and if it takes a little longer to sell than you're comfortable with, going back and doing a little bit of objective analysis on the property, you might change the condition. You will almost certainly change the price. But what I can tell you for absolute certainty is you will get that flip sold at some point. With that, guys, don't panic. Get started today. Please subscribe if you got some value out of this video today. I would love to bring you the latest in foreclosure investing tips each and every single week right here on the Foreclosure Deals Coach podcast, and get started. Don't be afraid of something that hasn't happened yet. The market is great for flipping right now. We can buy properties well below market. We are selling houses each and every single day in this marketplace. The opportunities are out there. You just have to take the first step. With that, Deal Hunter, this is your Foreclosure Deals Coach, Donny Corum, thanking you again for tuning in and reminding you now and always, don't buy a house, buy a deal.